Always remember to do your own research as some of the tools that I'm about to show in this series are very new. Alright, it's nice to be back and we are continuing on our NFT card generating tool that we are creating from start to finish. So if you are new, go and check the playlist. I walk you through each and every step of the way. So far in the series, we've done a ton of stuff. We've set up the project, managed to get the NFTs from a wallet, managed to pull the metadata, and also generated Ethereum wallets for each of those NFTs. In today's video, the next step is supposed to be transferring the NFTs to the actual wallets. However, we're going to firstly focus on these three steps over here. We're going to focus on the UI design, UX and UI designs of the actual NFT card. And then we're going to create a card generating tool, and we're going to use Canvas to then take the information we have, like the name of the NFT, its public and private keys, and actually put it on the card as well. So we have a print ready NFT card. Okay, so there's a lot that we need to cover. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to move these three a bit up so that we know that these are the tasks that we need to tackle first. And then we set them all to in progress. In fact, I can actually change the first two to done. Now, the reason for this is I've gone ahead and before the video actually designed the cards myself. I did the UX design and the UI designs because if I had to do this live on this video, we would have sat here for a very long time. But I'm going to go over the designs in a moment, but just so you know, these two items are technically complete, seeing that we have the look and the feel, and we also have a UI design. This item is what we're mostly going to cover in the video. But let's go ahead and look at the actual designs. Now, when you do your designs, you can use any program such as Photoshop, Illustrator. There's also free photo editing tools. I like to use Figma because it's very developer friendly in the sense where I'm used to using Figma to create UX designs and UI elements. So I've used Figma over here. Now, just to give you a broad overview of the pages that I decided to include was the actual card itself, some kind of backing for this card so that I can print on both sides so that the back has a nice design as well. And then I've got an inner card, which is included inside of the NFT. You'll see in a moment how this folds. And then this is the backing for the inner. So just to give you a high overview. Each one of these cards are fully printed on an A4 paper. And yes, I can fit more than two on here, but I'm also trying to keep things like security in mind. If there's more than one of these cards on a page, then potentially you can see two sets of private keys in the same page, so we want to minimize that risk. Even though this is a risky thing, if you print it, you need to trust the artist or the owner of this to not really have revealed these secrets in any other way and make sure that this is the only one in existence. But that aside, that's why there's a singular card on an A4 paper. I also used an A4 paper so that I know the dimensions, so I can make sure that this card is as big as a trading card so it can fit into a binder. Now, if we zoom in on the main card itself, we can see that we've got a card that is two-sided. So we've got this side and this side, so the purple side and the white side. This is intended to fold in on itself. And then this little flap here folds up so that it closes this private key and seed phrase section. This is so that we don't reveal it, right? So that's why that folds up. Now, here we have an open space, an empty space for the NFT image. We've got this dot over there so that we can have some space for the name that's going to go over here. We've got the QR code that can be placed in there, and then the public key so that the public key can be printed in this vertical fashion. And then we obviously have the private key and the seed phrases. So this is basically the card itself, and you can design your card how you would like to. It doesn't have to be a trading card size card. You can go wild. The goal here is to now use a program and find the dimensions so that I can perfectly place the image here, the QR code, and the text elements where they need to go. This can then act as a template for me, so I can easily switch out the look and feel. Provided that the card looks the same, I can use the same values of this template to generate similar cards. So yeah, now that we have the design, I can export this as an A4 template. I also have the backing for this. And then I also have this inner card. Now these I can print multiple on one page. It just explains things like how to import the wallet, how you can transfer the NFT out to a more permanent storage. It's like an info page. And it also helps to make the card feel more rigid and stronger as you print this on a cardboard, and you can add this inside when you have folded the card. And that just gives it a bit more structure to the card. And this is just the backing for this. So I'm trying to make the product look very professional. And at the end of the day, once we have printed this and actually have the cards, we fold them up. I do clamp the corners so that they are rounded, and then I go ahead and heat seal them so that it's kind of tamper proof. But the idea here is to make it a great experience for someone purchasing the NFT and then opening it. Okay, so now that the visuals are out of the way, we can focus on the code. So let's take a look at the system design. We now know that we have in the previous video created the Ethereum wallet generator. We have the NFTs and the wallets that they need to go to. So we have all the information. And now we need to focus on creating an NFT card generator, which we'll just have here using Canvas. We also going to create a separate QR generator just so that we have extra flexibility in the future if we want to use different forms of QR codes. And then obviously we need to make this work so that we can output them to some folder on our system. So that's what we're going to do next. And we can now just jump into the code. Now, remember last time we did this console log with some actual wallets that we generated. Please do not use this. I'm just going to reiterate this one more time, just so that we know that this is mock and dummy data that we shouldn't be using at all. So what you see on my terminal, please do not go and add these wallets to your MetaMask. Okay, so the first thing is that we can now take all 4 of our templates and just keep them here in our assets. So I place them all here. This is the template, the main template that I just showed you. And then of course, just the inner and the inner back, just so that we keep them in one place. We don't lose them. We're not going to use these for now. This will be happening when you print, but the one that we're going to focus on is this template.png. Now I feel like we can focus on the QR code generator first, seeing that that's a piece that we'll need in the card generator. So in the terminal, we know that we're going to make use of QR code, the library, and then also Canvas. So let's go ahead and run npm install, and then we'll install these 2 packages. Once this is done, we can then go ahead and actually close some of these things down and then focus on creating the interface first. So in interfaces, let's create a new file, iqrcodegenerator.ts. Now I'm going to just add the code here that we'll need. Basically what this is it's going to export our interface, which is the iQR code generator. And we only want one function. It is to generate a QR code, and we just want to provide it the URL. Basically, this URL will be the Etherscan link that points to this wallet. This is so that you can publicly just scan it on the card and get yourself to Etherscan, seeing what is inside of that wallet. So that's what we're going to pass here. In the future, we can add more things, such as defining the width and height and all the options in here too. But for now, this is fine. And then we're just going to return a string, which is basically going to be the base 64 of this QR code. Great, so now we can go into the core folder and create a new file here. We'll call it qrcodegenerator.ts. And remember, here we use the kebab case. So now we can go ahead and create a new class, and we can say this will be our QR code generator, and this will implement the iQR code interface that we just created. Now we can use VS Code. If we hover over that and we say fix, we can just implement this interface. We can see that now that function is already there for us. The first thing I want to do though is add an if statement that's going to check if once we've imported our app error, if there's no URL, we want to immediately stop and let us know, hey, there's an error. We cannot create this QR code because even if we do manage to, then it's not going to add any value to our product. So let's put this if in place and log out that error. So after this if statement, we can add our try catch block, and we're also going to just make sure that we error out if anything fails in actually creating this QR code. So in the try catch block, we can now just create the QR code using that QR code library, which reminds me that we actually need to install the typings of that QR library too. Previously, we did install the QR code library, but now we also need to run npm install -- save dev and then types QR code. When we do so, we'll get a VS Code to recognize what we want to use from this library. So now that we have that, we can go ahead and at the top, import the QR code library. In the try block, just make sure that our function is set to async because we need to await something here. But we can basically go ahead and return await and then QR code. And now we are going to say to data URL. And what we're going to pass in is the URL. Now you can add extra options to this as well. So what we can do is we can say the QR code options will be this object where we define the default width, margins, colors, which is the dark and light, which is basically the foreground and background. And we can then go ahead and pass that in here too. This will give us like the base default values. We can also add these in the constructor if we want to be meticulous. But in the next step, we will be able to scale it further. This step is just to create a detailed enough QR code for us. Okay, so that is basically it. I think that our QR code generator is now done and complete, and we should be able to use it. This means that we can move on to creating the NFT card generator that's going to utilize the Canvas library and the QR code library or class that we just created. So we can go back in our program and inside of the interfaces folder, let's create NFT Card Generator.ts. Now the interface for this will look like so. We just need to import our data structure here. So we've got our NFT card generator interface, which will have one function, generate cards. We will pass into it an array of the data type INFT with wallet. Remember in the previous video, we created the NFTs and then also their wallets. This is because we need all the data. We need the NFT, its image, its details of the wallet that it's going to live in, all in this function. So that's why we pass in all that data here. And then simply we can just return maybe the paths of where these cards were stored. Because if we look at our design, this is going to have to output this into some sort of folder. So here we just get a feedback of where they were stored. Fantastic. So now we can go into core, create our new file, which will be nftcardgenerator.ts. Then again, we're going to export our new class, and this class would be NFT Card Generator. It will implement our INFT Card Generator interface, and this is a generic core feature. We're not making a specific implementation, but we can do that because if we have different templates that need to consume this data, this is why we spend so much time defining the interfaces and separating these modules so that it is very plug and play and malleable so that you can make some changes. Let's hover over this and then go and implement what we need. Now here, it's going to be the card generated. This returns a promise. So let's just make this async as well. And we're ready to start. Now there is a lot to cover, especially when it comes to this NFT card generator. There's a lot to do where we have to kind of manipulate pixel data and position things in weird ways. So just stick with me till the end. It is going to be a bit technical, but we'll get through it step by step. And by the end, you'll fully understand this class. Firstly, let's create a new interface here at the top, and we're going to call this iOptions, like we do with all our other classes. In here, I'm going to have a template and path. So template path, this will be string. And then we also have the output there. So the output directory. The template path will be the path to our template, the one that we created in Figma or wherever you have created yours. That will be this template path. And then the output directory will be the result where we're going to store, what folder we're going to store all these cards in. Okay, so now we can go ahead and define some private variables and also define our constructor. Now I'm just going to import these few things so I can explain what we're doing here. So at the top, we're going to import our QR code creator that we made. And then also we're going to import the FS library and also the path library, which we'll use in this class. Now, firstly, we've created these three private variables, which is just going to be our template path, the output directory, and also the QR code generator, the one we created. In the constructor, we pass in our options and we assign the variables in this class to the option values, and also we create a new QR code generator. Then in here, we use the FS library to check if no output directory exists. And if there is none, then it's actually going to make that directory for us so that we don't hit any errors when we actually start generating the cards and there's no output folder for it to put it in. Now, before we continue, we need to understand how Canvas adds things to itself. So Canvas works on a 2D basis where we have X and Y values. The X and Y values run from top to bottom and left to right. So whenever we want to add an element, let's say text, because our public key will be text and our private and seed phrases will be text as well as the name, we need to give it an X and Y value on where it should start, and there it can then put it. So if we wanted this vertical public key to be here, we need to give it the X and Y coordinates of this spot over there, right after the public key wording, so that we can add the text and then also orient it in a different way. For the private key, we'll need to give a position over here and maybe change the alignment. But this means that we're going to have to add a lot of text. And so I think it would make sense for us to go into the code and firstly create a helper function that will help us add text so we don't have to repeat ourselves throughout the class. Also, just a tiny tip, if you ever work with Canvas and you keep on forgetting which direction the axes run, if you think about the letter Y here in the terminal now, it looks like a downward facing arrow with a long leg. And Y would always be the one going from top to bottom, and X would be then the one going from left all the way right. All right, so now we can start with our function. The first thing I want to do is at the top import Canvas rendering context 2D as node Canvas rendering context 2D. This is just so that we can use it in our draw text function. So here we can go and say, let's create a private function and call this draw text. This is going to be a function that returns to us void because it doesn't really need to return anything other than just drawing the text. This function is also going to have a ton of configurable parameters. So I'm going to add this and then explain all of them to you. So firstly, we add the CTX, the context from Canvas. Now this we already imported so that we know what type it is. Then we have the text. This is the plain text that we want to actually draw. We have the X and the Y values, so we know where to position this text. And then we add extra options. These options is so that we can play around with the text formatting. So the alignment, the font, the fill style, the rotation, and also the translation as well. Then to fill out the body of this function, we will add all the functions that's going to actually draw this text on the canvas. So firstly, we're going to save the context as it is. This is so that we can preserve what was already drawn on the canvas, seeing that Canvas will redraw itself. Then we look if we have the translate option, if we need to do some sort of translation and that is present, then we can go and add the translate there and also take our options values for that translation. We also then go and look at the rotation. If it's there, then we go and actually look at how much rotation we need to add. For the text, we define the text alignment, the font, and the fill style based on the options. And we also give it some default values, or if it's not specified, we know what to style the text with. Then lastly, we're just going to fill the text, which is actually drawing it and giving it the position of the X and Y. And lastly, we call restore so that if we did translate or rotate it, any weird things we did to the canvas instance, we can just restore that to normal. Next, we are going to call this generate card function, but we're going to be passed in an array of INFT with wallet data. So we're most probably going to loop over all of these and then generate a card. So it would only make sense for us if we actually created a separate function so we can split out the responsibility and then go and say, let's create a generate a single card function. So this one could just be generate a card. And for the generate card, we'll maybe say this NFT is the INFT with wallet data that we're going to get. And this will give us back that promise string that we need. Now, in this function, we can actually extract all the data pieces that we're going to use when we generate the card. So we can go ahead and say const, let's do NFT data. We're going to extract. And in fact, to make it easier for ourselves, let's say this is the NFT. So we're going to extract the NFT from there and then also the NFT wallet. The next variable or the next variables we want to extract is actually going to be from the NFT data up here. And in the NFT data, we've got the token ID and we also have the metadata available. Then we can go ahead and extract all the secret variables as well as the public and private keys. So this will come from the wallet. So we can say this will come from the wallet. We need the public key. We need the private key. And we also need that mnemonic phrase. Yeah, these are all the values that we are going to use. Next, we need to create our canvas. So we'll do canvas. This is going to be equal to create a new canvas. And the canvas will be 2480 by 3508. And then from this, we can actually get the CTX. So the context is going to come from canvas.getContext. And we're going to then say we need the 2D context. Now that we have these, we can go ahead and get our template. Our template, we will actually load in. So we can say await load image. And the image is going to come from this dot template path that we've specified and passed into our constructor. Then we can go and say CTX, go and draw an image. And this will be our template. So we're going to say draw the template at the axes 0 and 0. And we're going to make it canvas.width and the canvas.height. And let's not forget our comma over there. Perfect. Now next what we can do is add a try catch block. Again, we try something and we catch with an error if we couldn't perform the action. What we want to do is we want to grab the metadata image, which is the NFT's image, and store it in this variable. And then we're going to call the context like we did with the template and draw that image on this X and this Y on top of the template and give the size of this NFT image. If this fails, then we're going to throw the app error and say it could not load this image of this token because there's no point in continuing if the image is not going to be on that card. So here we just do a little try catch just to make sure that that particular step works, seeing that the image will come from an outside source. Now I've pre-configured the X and Y values to fit to my template and make sure that it renders perfectly on that square that we've defined for the image, but you can play around and see how the values will change the output of that image. After we have now successfully drew the image of the NFT there, we can now go ahead and try and draw the name. So we also get that from the metadata name. If not, we're just going to leave it as unknown. But here, interestingly, is the first time we get to use our draw text function. So we're going to say that use this context. This is the text we want you to draw. And this is on the X and the Y value, the positioning of this text. And then we just give it some basic styling. So now we should have our name being drawn on the template. Next, what we do want to draw is the public key. So then again, I'm going to use our draw function, this time passing in the public key that we've extracted here at the top. But interestingly here, we need to rotate it. So we're going to give it the X and Y as 0, but then use the translate to rotate it so that we also can position that nicely in that vertical fashion. Now that we have the public key, we can move on to the private key. Now the private key is unique. It's a very long, character string. And if we want it large enough but not extend this page, we'll need to cut it in half and then place it right beneath each other here in this little block. So I've worked out the parameters to get that done. And then I'm also going to work on the seed phrase to split up the words, seeing that there are 12. We can split them in 3 different lines. So for the private key, the first thing we do is create 2 variables, pk1 and pk2. This is just the division, right? We split that private key in half, and then I just simply draw the private key part 1 and private key part 2 on 2 different lines. And that's how we get that there. For the mnemonic phrase, what we do is the same, but it works a bit differently, seeing that we need to split the words into 3 sections. So we will take that word, we'll split it, and then we'll just draw each section right below each other, making sure that on the Y values, we have enough space between each other to make it look okay. So I'm going to show you that as soon as we render our image. After we have our phrases on the template now, we can focus on adding that QR code. So I'm just going to add these few lines. In the first line, we create our variable for the URL. You can see that this points to Etherscan, and we just append the public key so that if we go to this URL, we will end up on Etherscan on that wallet. Then we create the data URL using our generator. So we go and generate the code, and then we just have the QR code as well, and we load that image, the base 64. Then we go ahead and draw it on the positioning and the sizing. If you can recall that I said we can resize it, this is where we resize it, and we give it the position where that needs to render. The last part is just to store this image. So we're firstly going to create a file name, which we just say NFT card token ID.png. We create a full path joining our output directory and the file name. We create a buffer, and then we go and write this file. And then we just return the full path so we have that record of where it was stored. Now, apologies for all this code that I've added, and I hope that you understand each block as I had to add it separately and make sure that it's in small enough chunks. It's just too much to write out and explain at the same time, and I hope that this structure worked well. But now we actually have our generate card function. This will have the responsibility of successfully generating one card on a template. Now, all that left to do is basically to implement the generate cards, add our loop, and then make sure everything is set so that we can render these cards. Now, in order to implement this, let's add our first variable, and this would be generated card paths. At the end of this function, we just wanted to know the generated paths where all these cards are. So we can just firstly return this variable, even though it's going to be empty for now. Then we need our for loop. Now, this for loop is a bit bulky, but I'll explain it in a sec. So it's everything from here to here. Firstly, what's happening here is that we're taking the NFT wallets, we're looping over them, and then we can run each NFT individually. For each NFT, we have a try catch block, and in the try, we do what we want to do, and in the catch, we catch the error. This error works a bit differently, as I'll explain in just a second. But the first thing we're going to try and do is get the card path. And we get this by actually running our generate card function that we just created down here, passing in the NFT. Then we go and check if the path does not exist, meaning that this card was not really created successfully. So if this fails, then we can safely say that we should stop the process and actually throw our app error. And so then we go ahead, once that's all fine, we just let ourselves know that the card has been saved, giving it the ID, and then we push it the path to our variable here at the top. If anything goes wrong and we can identify basically what went wrong with the token ID, we can print that out. And if there's any other type of error coming with this process, we will see that too in our catch block here. So that is it. The last thing we can just maybe add here at the top is a little console log letting us know that we have started generating the NFT cards. And that's it for our class. Now, there is something at the end of this video that I'm going to add and show you how to add a security block. But for now, we're going to go ahead and create our cards. Let's head over to the run.ts file that we have been building out throughout the series. We're going to import the path library there at the top. And then just here after our configuration, we're going to define the template path as well as the output directory. Now that we have the template and output directory, we can just go along and like the other formats that we did before, we're going to firstly create a card generator using the new card generator that we just created. So let's import this over here. In the constructor, we pass that template path as well as the output directory. Then in our try block here, what we can do is we can just simply await the card generator dot generate cards. And of course, we pass in this NFTs with wallet data. And that is it. That is all for this step. If we run it now, we hopefully should see 4 cards. As we can recall, we have 4 NFTs in that wallet. We should see those 4 cards coming back and actually the cards being generated. Now, the last step is not included. So even if I run this and I show you the private keys and public keys, it's not going to matter because I haven't done the last step where we actually transfer those NFTs. And that will happen in the later videos. Now we're just going to run it and enjoy what we created. So in the terminal, let's go and run ts node source execute run.ts. So this should run through all of our steps. We should scan the tokens first. And there we go. It started scanning the wallet. It created this output folder for us and it's empty for now as it still needs to do the metadata step. And then it did get that. The metadata has loaded. And now it's going to move on to creating the wallets and then generating the cards. And now you can see the cards are being generated here. So we've generated 2. We're still waiting for 2 more. There's the third one. And the fourth one will be there soon. But this is so far really cool. And at the end, of course, we do log out everything. In the final one, we do recommend to not log anything that is sensitive details. But for now, this is fine because every time we run it, it's new values. But let's go ahead and look at a card that we've created. So there is one of the cards. And as you can see, we grabbed that image and it was perfectly placed in our template. The name is placed there. The public key is vertically oriented, like so. And then we get the private key, which is split in half. And then our seed phrase, which is split in 3 sections, as well as our beautiful QR code. So yeah, I mean, it worked. And we can look at another one. This is the beautiful thing about templates is now that we have this, everything is set up. So we can now just run it and create as many of these as we want to. Now, before we end in the video, I said I'm going to show you how to add a security block. Now, here at this bottom part, this purple section, it's quite empty right now, but the idea is to fold this in on itself to cover the private and the seed phrase. However, if it does that, it's not enough because if you shine a light through there, you can make out what these words are. So we need some sort of obfuscation here, which we can do with the security block. So basically, if we go back to the NFT card generator, and right at the bottom of my class, I can add this function. Now, this is quite a lengthy function, and it also makes use of random words, the library. So in the terminal, I'm just going to say npm install random words. And then also, if we want to add the TypeScript, we can say npm install -o save types random words. However, this function, basically, it's there to mess up words. So you can take your time and go through this. I'm not going to go through it every single line, but basically what this does is it goes and it mixes a lot of random words and places it on top of each other, making it difficult for us to make out what this actually is or what it is if we shine a light through it. Where we can call this, though, is if we go into our draw function here, right before we add the QR code, we can simply go ahead and await adding the security block. Now that we have this, I can go back to the run.ts file and let's run it one more time. So I'm going to hit ts node run.ts. We're going to go through its whole thing. And the idea here is now to have a security block in that folding section. Okay, so it started creating the card and it's already created 946. So if we open 946 now and I zoom in a bit, you can see the random words being obfuscating basically itself as well. But the purpose is if you fold this in on itself, then hopefully it's much harder to just make out what the words and the characters are of the private key and seed phrase. But also to add security, you can print this on thicker cardboard so it's not obvious. And ideally, what should happen is for someone not to keep this card forever. When someone has purchased a physical card like that, it is recommended that still in the artist's presence, maybe at the gallery evening, for that person to open it up and transfer the NFT to their permanent storage wallet. This is not intended to be a trusted system, especially because it depends on people printing things like private and seed phrases. Anyway, this project is for fun and for us to learn on how to work with these technologies, so the stuff we learn here can apply elsewhere. I hope you enjoyed this video today. I'm very excited for the next one. If you did, leave a comment. And as always, subscribe for more content like this. I'll see you in the next video. Cheers for now.